You know, I made a transition, which is necessary for anybody who is being diagnosed with HIV or AIDS, and that is that I got past understanding that I was dying, and I began living with AIDS.
The first thing that seems to happen is most people panic. They fall into very deep depressions, and they're quite certain they are going to die. That is very stressful. And what one needs to do is to get away from that thought, that way of thinking. And what you need to do is start helping yourself.
When I was diagnosed, I was working in the restaurant. I was at work this particular day, and I wanted to find out the results for my tests, so I phoned my doctor, and he didn't want to give them to me over the phone, but he did anyway, and they were positive. So I went into a state of shock, as a lot of people do, and I had to get away. So I told them, like, I was through, and ordered them to make me a big drink, and I went out and drank it and left. And then I proceeded to crawl into a bottle for about 3 weeks, and remained sort of in the same state off and on for about 2 years.
And I remember walking out of the steps of the doctor's office with tears running down my eyes, and it was raining out, and I could have just slapped the first person that said something to me wrong, because I was very angry. And I had nothing, nobody to go to or to turn to, so I more or less kept it within me for a long period of time.
The day I was diagnosed, it was a very traumatic experience for me, but fortunately I had a doctor that was very understanding about the situation that I was in, because I was to be married the next day. So I was nervous already because of those circumstances. I felt like someone just took a knife and put it right through my stomach and turned it around 1,000 times. I had like a physical pain, real, it was just a pain that I've never felt before. And I just told her, I said, take me to the bridge. See, I'm the kind of person who want to have some sort of control of my life. And for me, I wanted to have the say when I was going to die, not a disease. I just wanted control. And it made me angry because something else, perhaps, may have control. I'm not saying it will, but it may. And that really made me angry and frustrated. It's like I had all these things at the same time. I was denying it, and then angry and frustrated and depressed at the same time. It was, it was kind of rough.
It's like somebody's just said to you, well, it's over. And you understand it in a way, but you don't. Like, you're angry, you're hurt. Why? So one of the big questions is, why me? What did I do? And you don't have any answers.
Well, I was diagnosed, it'll be 5 years this July. That's when they found out that I was diagnosed, but I probably had the virus in my body for 2 years before that, without nobody even knowing about it. Yeah. So, I mean, it's like I think of myself as a good example, that just because you're HIV positive, you're not going to be dead next week or next year.
On November 10th of 1988, I woke up and I felt like a Mack truck had run me over. I had no energy. I was aching all over. I didn't feel like eating. I was sick. Oh, well, here we go. How long was it going to be now? It took the doctors about a month to figure out that I had large cell lymphoma when they removed a small tumor from my neck. And 2 days later, on about the 17th of December, they said, Mike, you've got 2 to 4 months to live without treatment. I said, great, let's make it short and sweet. Give me lots of painkillers and let me go quick. So in the meantime, here I am in the hospital, and I can't eat very much. I'm getting skinnier, and this one doctor, she wanted me to try this chemotherapy. And finally, after trying to convince me for quite a while, I finally agreed to it. She said, "We don't promise you a cure, but it might help your pain." And I said, "Well, okay, I'll try it." My pain went away after the very first treatment. I continued for 10 weeks of chemotherapy. I weighed about 108 pounds at that time. I had lost my hair from chemotherapy, so I looked pretty sickly. And during July, I started feeling better. And by early September, I was well enough to fly to Windsor, Ontario to visit my folks and tell them, "Hey, look at me, I'm still kicking around."
I had to deal with people who don't want to come and see me. I had to deal with mainly my own fears. And so I got in touch with the Network of Edmonton, the AIDS Network of Edmonton. And fortunately, they had a gentleman there who I practiced him as a social worker. And he happened to be Native. So it was a relief. He had a great sense of humor. You could hear him laughing and stuff like that. And you know, and Indian people have such a unique sense of humor that we joke about. We have a sense, it's different. That only we can understand that kind of humor. And I felt real comfortable with that.
I took a lot of pride. I was very vain. Well, I still am vain. I can't deny that. But I took a lot of pride and I was very vain about the way I looked. And I took very good care of myself. So that this transition was a very difficult adjustment. But as time goes on, you adjust. I guess that's another thing I would say to HIV people, that no matter how at the moment you feel you can't cope any longer, no matter how much you don't feel that you could go on, if only you took the time to acknowledge how you're feeling, you can adjust, you can cope, you can go on. What physicians don't seem to be sensitive to is the idea that we're not trying to tell them what to do. What we're trying to do is participate actively in our own treatment.
It's very lonely, very scary when you're doing these different drugs that they're giving you. One time they gave me, I don't know how big a dose of painkillers, but like I was so, what do you call that, medicated that I got up and I was bouncing along the hallway from wall to wall. That's how crazy I was. And I gave him shit the next morning. I really told him I'd never ever want to feel that way again. I mean, there was no need for me to have that many painkillers in me. And I wasn't appreciative of it. And they never did. After that, it was pretty cool.
I don't know, I find that sometimes they don't have enough compassion within themselves. They do their job and that's it. And they don't see how a person is feeling, or if they're aching, it's always because the virus. You get tired of hearing that. Because if you have a good doctor with a good attitude, you're going to maintain a good attitude and you're going to be able to talk to him and be open and honest to him or her. And I think that's important as well.
As I'm doing a number of things in addition to medications, I'm more conscious of what I eat. I was accustomed to eat a lot of greasy food, a lot of fat food, a lot of not healthy food. These days I find myself eating more fresh fruits and vegetables, less fats, no salt or less salt. I go to fitness classes pretty well regularly, almost every day, 5 days a week. I found since I've been doing that, my energy level has increased considerably. I would rather put my faith in science than in natural healing, even though I do realize there is a place for other remedies in our society. But I would suggest that someone would go on AZT. If there are side effects, one can, decide at some later date. But I think it is something that we should try.
I got into meditation, which I find very relaxing. It lets you get quiet. You kind of get into yourself to the point of you forget about what am I going to have for supper, what am I going to wear tomorrow, or oh, somebody doesn't like me or something. You forget about all those problems. You learn how to relax. I do a variety of things. I'm into acupuncture, meditation, imagery, good food from I've tried macrobiotics. I work at it. I don't do it 100%. I try not to burn myself out. I try to relax.
What I practice now is the sweetgrass and the smudging. I find that I've been really into that quite deeply now. And a lot of meditation and praying that, to the grandfathers. It's my way of feeling close with one. Somehow being spiritual by the power of an eagle feather and the eagle itself, I feel very strong. If it wasn't for this eagle feather, I wouldn't be here right now, I believe.
I was diagnosed in 1983. At that time, I was living in Winnipeg. So the only kind of information that they had was things I would hear in the media, things in the paper, things on TV, things like that. It was all negative stuff, actually. There was not much for support there at that time. So it was pretty rough. It's pretty rough. It's like having to deal with this thing and hearing all these things that you were going to die and at least to AIDS and stuff like that. Because my doctor gave me 3 years to live, right? And here it is 7 years later, right? Only a few people I've told in my family who I'm very close with and who I'm friends with. My immediate family, my mother and them, don't know. Because I feel those who can't deal with it, it just is not concerned, because I'm the one that has to deal with it. And those who give you a lot of opposition don't realize that, I'm the one that's got to deal with the pain, the rejection, the loneliness, the isolation. But now after 7 years, I feel it's time to tell them. So like when I leave here and go back, I'm going to go back and tell them, because I feel they're ready for it now. They weren't ready then. But what fears me is seeing their pain, and I can't really do much about it, because I'm fine. However they react it's an honest reaction, and it's real. I have to accept that, whether it's negative or positive, whatever. But like seeing them hurt, and it's like, that's rough. That's rough. I'll provide them with a lot of literature and be there for them and things like that. That's all I can do. And let time take its course.
The band members, they've been very supportive. My family's been very supportive. I believe my grandmother has been my most inspirational kind of woman, because when she's given me this eagle feather at a rally, it was initiated by my mother as well, that I felt a sense of, it's okay, Ken, we're behind you, and the elders were there as well. So I felt encouraged.
I've turned this around, right? I stopped looking at this as a death sentence, because it's not a death sentence, It's a disease that can be controlled, and so like you gotta look at it that way. It's like, and stop believing all the things that you hear, and just nurture yourself. Surround yourself with things that give you pleasure, and cut out all the things that aren't good for you, even people, because as you get older, it becomes easier and easier to cut out the negativity in your life. You don't need it. People don't need it.
Being Native and diagnosed, that is one powerful thing, because as a Native individual, we tend to look at spirituality and death. And, it's with the picture in the backdrop here. It really hit home when I noticed it. I was moved. It's the type of message that's affiliated with being diagnosed with HIV and AIDS. You can see the backdrop, you can see the split, you can see that both people are turned away with their heads low because of a shame. You have the little ones who are trying to pull them together. We could use that as a story of its own and saying perhaps it was alcohol, perhaps it was drugs, perhaps it was incest, perhaps it was sending the kids away to residential schools. And above all, perhaps it's being diagnosed HIV or AIDS.
I come from a small fishing village in Indian Harbor, which is near Peggy's Cove on the shoreline. The people there, as you could understand, in a small community, know everybody's other's business. And you don't dare talk about sex or anything that evolves around sex or personal things. It's just, you talk about the weather and that's about it. And I really don't know how the community has reacted since I've come out public, because I am not really allowed to go back home because of being disfellowshipped as a Jehovah's Witness.
And for them to deal with the fact that somebody was infected, as well as the fact that somebody was homosexual, was really difficult for most of the people to overcome. The fact that my doctor's secretary told people in the community that I was infected did not reflect negatively on her, as far as most of the people in the area were concerned. They felt that what she had done was something that was commendable.
One elder and one church member came to my mother's house and informed me that I was not allowed to attend for their fear of transmission to other people. They had been told by more than one nurse in their church that there was no danger. But the paranoia and fear was to the point where they seemed not to care about anything else except their own fear.
Tell me about Alvin.
Now, Alvin was the elder who came to see me, and the man couldn't look me in the eyes. He couldn't. He kept looking at the floor. And he had no idea how the disease was transmitted or anything. And when I told him that he either had to have sex with me or have my baby, he just lost it. But I don't think he's going to do either.
My mom and dad, who needed support and love from the church at that point, like they've never needed it before. Deacons in the church, their wives, put the family down. I picked my mother up off the bloody kitchen floor because she did not have the energy to go outdoors anymore. She was so embarrassed and so afraid and so ashamed and didn't understand what was going on, and all she was thinking about was her baby boy was dying.
It's very difficult on everybody because right now I'm at a time where it would be nice to have some sort of family support, but it's just not possible because of their religious beliefs.
My very first support group for AIDS and AIDS-related complex individuals was the people who are now mostly involved with the PWA Coalition. In fact, it started that night, my very first support group.
Getting involved with the AIDS organizations across Canada, the two that I've been involved with, AIDS Vancouver and the Nova Scotia Persons with AIDS Coalition, has been very vital to my focus, to my direction in survival. I have put together quite a comprehensive volunteer network. Asking people for help wasn't a chore. I wasn't going to be rejected. There was always other options. So somebody's busy, I'll find somebody else to help, and make people feel very comfortable with that.
This organization is not designed to help anybody. This organization is designed to provide an opportunity for people to help themselves. That's what I needed when this organization came together. And there were a group of people who also needed that same thing in their lives, that we needed some way, we needed to find an effective forum for helping ourselves.
When my doctor, she told me to calm me down. She told me, we'll go to the coalition. And I heard about it a bit before, but I just did not know how it was set up. I didn't know, I figured once I stepped in, I'd have to, they'd take my clothes off as some sort of, ritual of some kind. I just did not know what to expect. And I was scared out of my mind. But I was wrong. It wasn't like that at all. The first person I saw was Fred Wells, and I love that guy a lot. He was amazing. He was so calm. He has AIDS. I was looking at him. He has AIDS, and he's smiling. He's not freaking out. we sat there on the coach in the lounge, and he hugged me and he didn't even know me. He cried with me and he didn't even know me. And that was something special. Like, no one actually showed any affection to me like that before in my life.
I'm a priest in the Congregation of Holy Cross. We're a community of priests, brothers and sisters, actually. And it's a very close community. The spirit, if we are summing it up for anyone, is often expressed as a familial spirit, a family life. And I think largely as a result of that, the community has been really very supportive. I was hospitalized in St. John, New Brunswick, and at that time, Bishop Hayes came to make a personal visit to me. And he drove all the way from Halifax to St. John, New Brunswick to do that. Took a Saturday morning and spent the whole morning with me, talked with me and encouraged me and heard my confession. And at that time, I said to him, you know, I tell people, and it disconcerts them in the West, that I'm not really a Western person, I'm not a prairie boy, that I want to go back to, I'll die in Halifax, is what I said to him. And his response was, no, you're coming back to Halifax to live some more. And that was a really significant thing at that point.
And I would really say if you're native or of another culture, you know, find someone that you know of who can relate to you in a sense of your own background, ethnic background, and there are people out there. But the thing is, you have to take that risk.
You cannot survive not liking yourself, or seeing yourself as a person who would be better off dead, or seeing yourself as a person who the community that you live in doesn't want to support, and you're not worth preserving. These are the things that helped me survive, and I know from my experience and watching my other friends that the people who survive are the people who see themselves as worthwhile, lovable human beings.
So I found as time went on, the more love I put out, the more love I got back. I found it very, very, very easy to access help because I suddenly became a very likable person. Not that I wasn't necessarily likable before. I was more of a loner before. But as time went on, I began to realize that reaching out made a lot of sense.
Another thing was I was worried about, will I ever have another lover, another relationship? That was one of my first thoughts also. And I thought, I'll never have another one. But over the last 5 years, I have had a relationship along the way. And so it's not impossible to fall in love again. You still can fall in love. And you can fall in love with someone who's not HIV.
Oh, there is most definitely love after diagnosis. My lover and I, in my case, are both HIV positive, and we have been engaged in safe sex practices now for the last number of years. Other than engaging in safe sex activities, we find there's absolutely nothing changed in our life. We still do all the things that we wanted to do, and we still enjoy each other and the company of other people. Yeah, it's really nothing's changed other than maybe the use of a condom.
And if your concern is that you will no longer be able to have sex, that's the least of your problems. That certainly won't happen. If by being honest, you're not going to get cut out of a happy sex life.
How do you know?
Through this relationship now, I have the absolute beautiful opportunity of having 2 kids in our home 1 weekend a month, and they're a part of our lives.
I think for me, one of the hardest things in dealing with my diagnosis was knowing how to react to my kids. So I had a real hard time coming to terms with that. And I must say, you know, now that I've progressed from where I was then, and being alone and dealing with so many things alone. In my relationship with Dale, we've been able to really become closer to my kids, especially now as they get older, and they're such a vital part to our lives, and we look forward to their visits, and they bring a vitality into our house that sometimes when we're just so aged out, as we call it, and tired, they really bring a refreshing sort of atmosphere to our household and into our lives.
I'm spending more time away from my real family, but I find I'm connecting a lot more with people who are diagnosed with HIV and AIDS. I feel a sadness when I know they lose someone, and no matter if it's across the land, I can sense it because I feel a part of me is going with that person because I can understand and I share the feelings.
Deal with all your losses. Like a lot of you perhaps will have to deal with losing your job, such as myself, losing a relationship, losing a lot of people that you're going to meet, friends who are also dealing with this as they pass away, which has happened to a lot of people I've known. But it's very important to deal with those things right away. Like grieve, go through the grieving process however you go through it. Like don't just bury it and forget about it, but deal with it. And because it really helps to get all the stress involved with all that out, and helps you to be able to continue on no matter what happens. From my own experience, it's very important not to isolate yourself, either before you get tested and certainly not after. Accept the fact that you have this diagnosis, but that you still have the right to be. Just care about yourself. It's very important.